Everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In Show. I hope you've all been keeping well. This week, we're joined by Samuel Hollis, who is the head of the UK business unit at Novartis, has spent close to 2 decades in the pharma industry, and actually started off his career as a sales rep. And we have to say congratulations. He's moving into a new role, which we'll let him share. But it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, Samuel. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Abdul. Thank you for having me, Ams. And pleasure to be on the show. I can't believe you said 2 decades. It's just dawned on me. You're right. I'm going into my 19th year. Yeah, so I'm close to 2 decades. Wow. Yeah.
And what an incredible journey you've had. You have truly worked your way through the ranks. And we really want to go back in time to kind of talk about that journey, talk about the lessons you've learned, how you've become a leader, how you've launched certain products. Tell us why pharma. How did you end up as a sales rep in pharma in the first place of all the industries in the world?
Yeah, no, a great question. And often one I ask myself. No, I don't. It's been an amazing industry. I think I at school always fascinated by science, right? That was my thing. But I played a lot of sports, and probably broke most of my bones in my body playing rugby and sports, and probably by that naturally drew attention to wanting to know how the human body worked and how it healed itself. So I ended up at university doing biochemistry at the University of Warwick. Loved it. Loved Warwick. So did biology and biochemistry. And then after that, did my postgrad at King's in pharmacology. And probably still at this point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Usual undergrad going into postgrad, just wanting to extend their time deciding what they're going to do with their life. But I had a great opportunity where, I won this GSK award, which was top graduate on the degree. And so started to look into it a bit more and was sort of said, well, look, would you like to learn a bit more about the pharmaceutical industry? So I went on and did a field visit or shadowed a sales rep at the time and loved it. Saw what they did every day. They drove around speaking to healthcare professionals, talking about science, which is what I love, right? And it's not car sales, right? It's not hard sales. You're trying to convince someone to use something they don't want to use or don't want to buy. It's genuinely was about having peer-to-peer level conversations at times, bringing the science to some often busy healthcare professionals who have a lot of things on their plate, who maybe don't get a chance to crystallize their thoughts on which medicines to maybe use. And so I started off in primary care, and it was exactly that, right? Quite understandably, the GPs and the nurse teams have 1,001 things to do, and you were helping crystallize their thoughts in a particular therapy area. So loved sales, worked on that for in a couple of years. And then this is at AstraZeneca where I started, and then moved into medical affairs. So because of my scientific background, back when I first started, the only jobs you kind of saw, guys, were the sales jobs in the pharmaceutical industry and then the research jobs. And you didn't really ever know what other careers existed within the pharmaceutical industry. But actually, there's loads. Like there's the medical affairs is a big area that's actually when members of the NHS or health professionals come into the pharmaceutical industry, it's a really good area to come into because it's that sort of it's a blend of using your clinical or medical skills to help benefit with insights into commercial teams and others. So I moved into medical affairs after sales, learned loads about sort of deeper customer understanding, healthcare professional understanding, and how to sort of translate data into something meaningful and that's interesting. And then moved into marketing and various different marketing roles and different therapy areas, but all at this point in the UK. And then got given a really exciting opportunity to launch a new medicine in the UK. And it went well, we learned a lot, and as a result, got the chance to move to the US for a couple of years to help bring that same medicine to more patients and so more patients could benefit. And this time it was in the cardiovascular disease space, which I'm extremely passionate about the impact we can make in that space. So that's sort of that took me into the US, and that was my first international assignment and first chance to sort of live overseas at that time.
Just going back in that journey,
yeah.
Tell us a bit more about the medical affairs role. And the reason I ask is clinicians and pharmacists, the first role they seem to get when they do leave medicine into a different sector like the world of pharma is medical affairs. And they never really understand what the role takes. So the two questions I want to ask you, Samuel, is what is the med affairs role, and how do candidates or individuals make themselves selectable? Because I know you do recruitment in your current role and kind of look after that. How do they make sure they're a
Yeah.
standout candidate?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And honestly, as I said, my few years I had in medical affairs were some of the most informative years I had in my whole career. Really important role. And the reason it's
Hmm.
important and why it's a great entry role maybe for those that are working in clinical side already is it's help you help teams elsewhere in the pharmaceutical sort of framework and matrix to understand how to best translate the clinical trial data, to how to understand how healthcare professionals are going to best want to understand this data. And so there's a
Hmm.
lot of sort of insight and guidance that you can give the rest of the business. But just because you're naturally more used to seeing that kind of data, maybe through your clinical and medical training, there's also an element of um, a lot of medical affairs get very involved in the clinical trial development because they find that particularly interesting, and so a lot of work on in that. And there's sort of I'd say two main roles. There are loads of different roles in medical affairs, but there's largely sort of your head office medical affairs roles, which are
Hmm.
again helping build the medical story, the medical value proposition for different medicines and therapy areas. But then there's the MSLs, which I don't know if you've heard of those. That's like a field-based medical role. It's not promotional. They don't sell. It's totally a non-promotional role, but where they go and help healthcare professionals, who have a specific request often and would like to learn a bit more about a therapy area, about a body of evidence, that the MSLs become specialists and experts in that field and would be able to go and speak to a healthcare professional at their request to learn a bit more about a specific area. And so that they're often really good roles to understand the pharmaceutical industry, understand how healthcare professionals are thinking about this particular therapy area or this particular disease, and then bring that insights back into the organization to ensure that we can, make sure we're bringing medicines to the healthcare professionals like they want to hear about them, right? Rather than about talking about things
Absolutely.
which aren't relevant. So I think it's a really good blend. And in terms of your question of what makes you strong in that role, it's that rich insights, often coming out of the NHS or
Hmm.
any healthcare roles and coming into it is hugely valuable because you have that external insight of like, this is what it was, right? I was a GP yesterday, and I can tell you this is what GPs want to
Yeah.
hear, right? And so that kind of insights, it's amazing. So I think that that's why it's particularly important. But then beyond that, honestly, like any job, but especially pharmaceutical industry, we want diversity in the workplace, right? We want to have
Hmm.
different people coming from different backgrounds, and we're better than the NHS, which is like the biggest employer we have in the UK, right? And the kind of things that anyone who works in the NHS is exposed to will benefit any company, but certainly a pharmaceutical company. So I think that the skills you have in the NHS, the insights you would bring would make anyone highly sought after to come into the pharmaceutical industry.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Samuel, so in this moment, right, let's say you're recruiting, let's say it's me and Abdul going for this
Yeah.
med affairs job. Give me some tips. How can I beat
Yeah.
Abdul to the job? What would you say I'd have to beat him at?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. So for me, there's some of the key areas that we do look at, and I guess this isn't just about recruiting from the NHS, but just generally, right?
Yeah.
Is we what makes you the best individual, the best leader, is we want people that can navigate complexity, right? Now, if you're in the NHS, you are brilliant at navigating complexity. Let's be real, right? So, but navigating complexity is something that is absolutely fundamental to get right if
Mm.
you're going to be joining into pharmaceutical industry. So we'd be looking at being able to assess you on different ways that you can navigate
Hmm.
through that. I think that the other element is I mean, it's cheesy line because I don't want it to get lost, but this enterprise thinking. So not just I'm here, I do my job, but that slightly more strategic view of people that can see, what is this is what I'm doing, and this is the impact of my actions. And so those
Yeah.
individuals and leaders that have more of an enterprise view that are, often do much better in our industry. Full stop. So they'd be the things that I would be looking to sort of if I was pitching the two of you against each other, like that's what we'll be looking at is certainly that.
Amazing.
And then on top of that, right, there's in this industry, but I think other industries, the world has changed. So, pharmaceutical companies are not led by men in suits, right, anymore. There's massive change in the diversity of leaders in our organization. The styles of leadership are totally different now than they used to be. You don't just look for the statesman-like individual to stand on stage. Instead, the leaders of today are vulnerable leaders, right? They're those that are willing to accept that things haven't worked and why they haven't worked. They're leaders that are authentic, right? So they're ones that actually, they what you see is what you get. They don't just come to work and it's someone different. And honestly, those are the kind of leaders that are most successful, not just in our industry, I think generally now. And so, authenticity is a big thing. And then again, because of the sort of, we're at this point now where I honestly believe with things like AI and other things, we're on the cusp of another transformational change in healthcare, right?
Absolutely.
We had the internet before, but I think honestly, like the AI now is the next internet, and I think we'd be looking for entrepreneurship. So that's the next stage. It's vulnerability, it's authenticity, but it's entrepreneurship, and I think that's how we'd be pitching. You guys against each other, but anyone else.
I'll be Abdul to this, I can guarantee. I'm joking. Samuel, a question here, right? Can you ever be too vulnerable as a leader? Because I think as leaders, what we can be is sometimes you can be a bit too scared where if you're too vulnerable, you're seen as, well, can you be seen as a weak leader because he's vulnerable? Can you ever be too vulnerable? Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a great question, and being vulnerable now, right? I can tell you that vulnerability is the thing I've probably had to work on the most on myself, right? Because I think I probably was brought up in a generation within this industry where you didn't show a weakness, right? You were successful and you were seen as being successful. I honestly believe you can't be too vulnerable. I think that I think it's the best way to build trust with your organization, with your people that you work with, by being vulnerable, by being authentic. And so I don't think you can ever be too vulnerable. I think that what it isn't is a signal of weakness, but I think that what it doesn't mean is you just you lead from the back all the time. Right, as a leader. Sometimes you need to learn when do you move to the front, and you do need to lead from the front. So what it doesn't mean is you just sort of sit back and you just you're just at the back of everything and you don't talk and you're just sort of sharing all your sob stories. That's not what it means. I think it's sort of it's linked strongly to sort of being vulnerable, letting people in to understand who you really are, allowing you to be authentic, but they're also then that pivot into situational leadership. When do you let your team thrive, right? And trust them and lead from the back. But then when are there times that they need you to lead from the front? And COVID and the pandemic was a prime example where actually, honestly, a lot of leaders who were servant leaders who needed to lead from the back normally, they had to come forward because they were needed. Their teams needed to hear from them. They needed to know that they were there and they were being led. So I think that's the other part of this. It's also sort of linked to leadership and different styles of leadership. But to answer your question more bluntly, no, I don't think you can ever be too vulnerable. That's our new world, right? If you're,
awesome.
Be you, be real, be authentic. So,
love it.
I love that. And going back to your journey, tell us a bit more about this concept, this idea of taking a new medicine to market or launching a new medicine as it did. What does that entail? What does that look like for a lot of our listeners? You're probably one of the first few guests from the world of pharma. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So it's it's a very, we haven't got long enough, I promise you, to talk about the complicated nature from idea to medicine, to brand. So, but it's complicated. I mean, I'm sure at med school or anywhere else, you learn about the percentages of chance of success are very low. So, because you start with an idea, you then create a target that you're going after, then you create a molecule, then you create a medicine that goes through the trials, then you create a brand like the commercial teams. And then quite naturally, then it goes into a different cycle where it goes off patent and other manufacturers manufacture it. So look, all through that cycle, there are just huge numbers of stages, which actually every single role involves people, and there are different career opportunities to work at those different stages. I only work in a little section, right? Generally, when I receive it, it's a medicine. It's going through the trials, and then it's about how do we turn that medicine into a brand that's recognized, around the world. But there are millions of amazing workers out there, the scientists who have these amazing ideas, who bring that idea into trials. And so I think that there's so much there in terms of turning a medicine into launching. To answer your question, generally you obviously, I'll be generalization here because every medicines can be different. Some medicines can be fast tracked if there's a special need because there's nothing else on the market. But let's just say in the UK, once your medicine has completed, I guess, enough of the trials to form a strong evidence base, right? Then regulators would look at that. If that's enough to give that medicine an approval, a regulatory approval. And in the UK, that's by the MHRA, for example, right? So they would say, we believe that this medicine is safe and is effective and then therefore should be available on, in this case, the UK market. But that's like first base in the UK.
Yeah.
That's just your medicine can be made available. Generally, and this is the vast majority of medicines, they would then need to go through NICE. So it's one thing to be available, but then you need to be cost effective, right? And we should be immensely proud of NICE. Yeah, it doesn't get everything right, but it certainly does. It's an amazing way of assessing cost effectiveness of our medicines. And we should be really proud of it because it protects us as taxpayers, right? To make sure that we're getting value for the medicine. And so it then does its own assessment for every medicine to determine, is it cost effective? Which population should this medicine be used in? And often that determines whether the NHS will reimburse the medicine or gives guidance to ICBs and things around the country of whether they should be reimbursing and paying for the medicine. So that's sort of that's step two. But then the NHS is not one homogenous organization, which on one hand we should be thankful it's not, right? Actually, budgets are held often not centrally, but regionally and locally. And so then there's an element of how does it get onto formularies? How does it get onto protocols? Local decision makers making, is this medicine right for our localities? And so those are sort of three, I'd call them barriers to entry for us, but ultimately they're also there to make sure that the right medicines are available for the taxpayers and for people around the country. And so those are the main steps, honestly. And then it's, if it's been made available and it's reimbursed and it's approved and it's safe and effective, then it can access for people and patients. So those are kind of the main steps, I'd say. And nothing's truly changed over quite a long period of time. You get regulatory approval, you get NICE, and then your localities tend to make decisions. That tends to be how it works.
That's quite helpful knowing that. And I don't think I knew the actual process and the steps for it. Moving slightly on with that journey, I wanted to ask, and it came to my head because a friend of mine is in America, he's in San Francisco. You've worked in the UK, you've worked in Switzerland, you've worked in America. Tell us about the difference in terms of culture, how things were there. Because every time I speak to people that have gone to America and they come back to UK, they feel the UK is a bit more conservative, whereas the Americans, they're a bit more bullish. They love innovation. They're probably a bit more forthcoming to new ideas. Did you notice that in the workspace, in the cultures and environments?
Yeah, interesting. Look, firstly, it was an amazing opportunity to work in the US. Even from a pharmaceutical industry perspective, generally, most companies, about half of their business comes from the US, right? So,
I can imagine.
It's for most companies, it's half the organization is US based at the moment. That is, of course, changing over time as different countries become bigger. But at that time, it was certainly in that space. It was a great opportunity to learn from, lots of strong leaders who are very experienced in the industry, and I did learn from them. Would I say that they are particularly more advanced when it comes to, adopting innovations? I'm not sure, Abdul, actually. I think it's much for muchness. I think there are big differences with, of course, how medicines are procured and insured, right? All of that bit you're very familiar with. So that takes a lot for someone that's outside the US to come in to understand the sort of the insurance process and how it works. But I wouldn't say necessarily that there's any more sort of innovation there. I think some of the most amazing innovations I see, sometimes they are in Europe, and sometimes not the UK, right? But some amazing things happening in Israel, as an example, with their sort of databases they have. It's truly amazing, and many other countries. So I think, I wouldn't say more innovative would be how I describe it, but certainly different, and a different way of looking at healthcare provision. And of course, as I'm sure of anyone who's been to the US, it sometimes takes them getting used to that the medicines are promoted directly on the web, on TV, and big adverts and Super Bowl adverts for these medicines. Again, it's not wrong. It's just different, right? It's just us in the UK, we're just not used to medicines being promoted directly to the public, whereas of course it sort of happens in the US, and that's different. Yeah.
Absolutely. Samuel, talk to us a little bit about how does the world of pharma sort of promote innovation for their employees, the people that work within the company and outside of the company? How do they sort of free you guys to be creative and sort of have a think beyond the box?
Yeah, I think this is, again, the new age, right? So we have to stay competitive in an industry that is very competitive. Let's be clear, pharmaceuticals. We owe it to shareholders and we owe it to patients that we are being as innovative as possible. So whether it be targeting new, let's park digital for now, but let's just say our bread and butter, which is producing medicines. The means of how we identify new targets, the things we have to do, we have to get quicker at running studies. We have to get quicker at identifying new targets and with new medicines. And so just purely on that alone, innovation is everything we do. Right? Everything we do has to be innovative. But if you look at more sort of the more obvious innovation things around sort of digital or AI, we have to do that because we have to get ahead in our industry, because that is the future. And I think that if I look at our industry overall and I look at the company I work for now, which is Novartis, and I think it really is really committed to data and digital, and how can we best utilize what we've got in our hands to benefit citizens around the world. And I think that and the big thing I would say, and I've felt that over the years, some companies or even our industry overall, there was a kind of, let's be innovative for the sake of being innovative. Let's be the first to do something in digital because we want to say it. I think now we've got a bit wiser to that. And it's about, we will do digital if it delivers impacts for patients, not because it looks good on a website, but because it's doing the right thing and going to benefit patients. And so I think we've just got much smarter at making sure we work with digital solutions that are actually solving problem statements, problems that exist for patients, for the industry. And I think AI will do that. There's no doubt. I think we still have to get to grips with how we do it and how we do it safely. But I think that, as an industry, we have to stay innovative to stay relevant, and we're doing that. And I feel very proud to work for Novartis in particular, that is very committed to doing this the right way. Yeah.
Talking about Novartis, you were at AstraZeneca for over 14 years. Why move to another pharma company? Let's get into Simon's head at that moment. Why do you jump ship? You are doing so well. Tell us about that rationale and some insights, because I imagine there may be other listeners also similarly thinking about, or in a similar situation to you were at the time.
Yeah, I mean, great question, and not one I've been asked a lot, actually. So you got me. So I think AstraZeneca was a great company to work for, and still is, right? It does amazing things. I think that it's healthy, in my opinion, to, whilst I very much welcome loyalty. I very much welcome those individuals that stay at a company for a long period of time, and I did, right? But I think that to grow, you do need to try new things, try new places, try new cultures. And there are, there's always differences. There's new leaders. And so I think that makes you healthier. It doesn't make you less loyal. It doesn't make, I'm not jumping around every year kind of thing. It's actually new therapy areas, new disease areas. And I think just makes you more rounded as an individual if you can build up a sort of a CV that has a wider
True.
background than just working in one company. Now, clearly, it's amazing those individuals that do work for one company for their whole career. I just think at that time it was the right time for me to try working in some different areas. Whilst being at AZ, I had worked in global roles. I'd worked in the UK role. I'd worked in Switzerland, and I felt like actually I wanted to try something else. And Novartis is a great organization. It's the number one pharmaceutical company. It's the number one pharmaceutical company in regional Europe. So it's a big company in Europe. And haven't regretted it. It's a great company.
Amazing.
If you were to look at your LinkedIn story stalking journey, right, which I've done, you slowly realize that you went from like a sales rep to the medical affairs side of things, and then you slowly transition into kind of the more serious business leading units type thing. Was that a natural progression? You started to upskill, or did you always have this affinity to kind of the business side of things, right? The structure, the corporate, the governance. Did something change? Did you notice your passions changed? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, good question. And actually, when we were going through the career journey, where we left off was me in the US, and so worked in a global role alongside the US organization, and loved it. But definitely at that point, you started to realize that what I really thrived from was leading people. So some of these roles prior to that, you were maybe a subject expert. You were strong in your field that you worked in, but what you missed and what you thrived for was more of a chance to lead people. And so when you were doing that, you got energy. And I think that the next roles I did after that, I was leading teams. And I think I get a lot of energy out of that, right? If I look at what, one part of my purpose why I do this is, I want to genuinely leave a legacy on individuals that I lead and work with, and help them achieve things that they didn't even think were possible, right? If that's part of your purpose, which it is mine, then you naturally go to those areas where you can lead and have an impact on the greatest number of employees and people in your team. And so, you do maybe naturally go that way anyway, but I've definitely tended to get a lot of energy out of moving through leadership roles and leading bigger teams, and feeling like that's my greatest way I can have the greatest impact on people, on society. It does happen naturally, I guess with any industry. As you get longer, you tend to get more management opportunities.
True.
But actually, I did realize that I felt strongly about was where I got my energy. Some people don't want to be line managers. Some people don't want to be leaders, but they do it because they think they have to. I genuinely loved it and wanted to do more of it, and wanted to have greater impact and lead more people and learn from people and help them, as I said, achieve things that maybe they didn't think they could do. So I think it does happen naturally, but I loved it and welcomed it, and hopefully kept it coming.
Amazing. Samuel, I get this really cool picture that you're really sort of continuously on an ever-growing, ever-learning journey. And a lot of people will be listening in and they'll be thinking, okay, so I'm in X position and I've got these skills. But how do I too also grow? Now, you can't just say experience, because experience is a great teacher. But how else are you sort of developing yourself? How do you always sort of stay ahead of the curve and make sure you're always growing?
Yeah, look, a great question. So I surround myself with amazing people, and that's generally how you learn, right? And so I learn so much from the teams I lead, but the leadership teams I sit on, and from the leaders that lead me. And I that's where I get a lot of my learnings from. I spend a lot of time with amazing leaders in the NHS. I also learn from them, right? It's not just all the pharmaceutical company, but you learn from those that you serve, like the NHS, who we serve here in the UK, but also innovators. So I try and get as external as possible. I spend time listening to and speaking to entrepreneurs in health tech to learn about what they're doing. So that being external and just listening and learning from others is a big part of it. Of course, I try and read a lot, but I'm not going to lie that I pick up a book every day, right? I'm not going to do that line. I promise you I don't. If my wife hears this, she'll laugh because she never sees me with a book, and she reads all the time. I read a lot on LinkedIn, truthfully, right? I'm
Nice.
some amazing things on LinkedIn of just learning from others and what their reflections are on leadership, on our industry we work in. And I follow the right people on there that I feel like you can pick up some amazing stuff. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of that. So and podcasts like this maybe, but podcasts like I do listen to podcasts and learn things from there. So that's definitely it. I think that growth though is about listening and learning, but there's a big element of growth which I guess I'm super passionate on, which is just how do you open up that growth mindset that you have. And I think that and not everything works, right? And I think, and this is the bit of the vulnerability thing like we talked about before. I think that the new generation of leaders, I think, are those that are more vulnerable and are willing to talk about the things that haven't worked and have learned from them and have actually got stronger as a result. And you're going to laugh, but my team know that I've got this thing called Be More Lobster. And I know you've been doing some stalking on LinkedIn, Abdul, so you may have seen the post, but you may not have, right? I Be More Lobster. Basically, what it means is, lobsters have hard shells, but to grow, they need to break through that hard shell, and by doing that, they get uncomfortable. So it's only when they get uncomfortable do they start to break through the shell and they grow a new shell, right? And I do firmly believe in that element of feeling uncomfortable. If you reposition it, some people will get stressed and they'll get tense and they'll wonder why on earth they're going through this. But if you pivot that whole focus and actually think, right, this is painful, I am uncomfortable, but think of what I'm learning as a result of going through this, right? It's putting a positive spin, I guess, on what would previously been seen as pressure and tough times. And don't get me wrong, there are some tough times you can't put a positive spin on. But let's say a lot of things at work or other things that we go through. How do you take that and realize it's a growth opportunity, right? And it's cheesy as hell, I know it is, right? But it's that element of it makes you feel uncomfortable. You then need to break out the shell, and that's when you go a bigger shell and you become a bigger lobster. So that's my thing. It's become I can't believe I'm talking about it. It's become my sort of tagline. Or anytime anyone sees me on Teams, they put a lobster GIF or some sort of. There is a lobster emoji now, by the way, and I'm almost certain I've helped create that beast. So I think, look, that's it. So that element of the opening yourself up, being vulnerable, but also repivoting some of the things that you go through as a growth opportunity, that you're going to be a stronger leader. You're going to be stronger at what you do because you've been through some tough times. And I do believe that. And again, we can relate it to work things. And most of the time it is work things where I bring it up. But equally, when we were leading, I guess that you guys may have been, on the front line during the pandemic and things. But when I was leading a team that were not on the front line, right, that we had to almost ground a lot of our sales representatives, our marketing teams. We couldn't go into the office, but we still had to try and do our jobs because we had to supply medicines. Clearly, we had to continue to supply our medicines. But everyone was at home; they weren't with each other, and everyone's been through this. I'm not pretending it's anything special, but actually, we used the COVID and the pandemic and spun it on its head a bit, and like, how did we grow as a result of that, right? And it's things like, we all know it, but like, 3 months before the pandemic started, no one even knew what Microsoft Teams was, right? So now I think I spent most of my life on that thing. So, things that we just got comfortable in doing these things, and it was painful. It was uncomfortable when we first started using that and not seeing people face to face. And now what, right? Now we, much more comfortable doing it. So it's just maybe where you can repivoting these stretching, challenging things and using them as a growth mindset opportunity. And so that's what I'm, I guess, particularly passionate about.
No, I love that. And I think you summarized it so well. And you don't realize how important it is for our listeners and us to listen to that coming from someone like yourself. You mentioned about the NHS, listening to the people you work with, to the people you serve. One of the things that me and Ams love to explore is this importance of open dialogue, open conversation between the industry and healthcare and NHS. And I want to kind of hear your thoughts on it and what you think can be done, because sometimes I feel not enough of it is being done.
Yeah, look, this now you got me on. This is my hottest topic, right? I think that if anyone ever invited me to a dinner party, which doesn't happen very much anymore, does it? But this is where I'd bore people, because I think there's a lot of work that has been done of kind of myth busting the pharmaceutical industry, right? I think we historically maybe didn't have the best brand and name and people or reputation over many decades previous to me working in it and in the early days of me working here. But honestly, so much has changed. And I think there's an element of those in the NHS that understands that, honestly, that the individuals that work in this pharmaceutical industry, 99.9% of those have a purpose about helping patients, right? That is, we have the same purpose as those that work in the NHS. We just have a different way of achieving it, right? Our way happens to be, how can we bring clinical trials and evidence and then medicines to help clinicians treat patients? And I think that sometimes we just need to sort of rebase some of that and rebase the reputation a bit. That, actually, I think it's like 65% of all of research and development done in the UK is done by pharmaceutical companies, right? Yeah. Sometimes we need to actually, as an industry, we're often quite quiet, but we need to be a bit prouder about what we're doing and the impact we're making. The nature of the collaboration has to start with trust. And that's why I talk about these things. So I think that when we have a trusted industry, which I think we've gone such a long way over the last couple of decades. And I think the way that the pandemic was managed and the way a lot of these companies stepped up has really helped that, in my opinion. But even beyond that, I look at some of the collaborations I see, some of them I've been a part of, have to start with trust. And actually the NHS trusting that the pharmaceutical industry is doing this for the right reasons. And we have a shared objective, right? Yes, we do serve our shareholders as a pharmaceutical company, but we also want to do the right thing. And this is often, the right thing is about helping our medicines reach the right people, right? And I think that sometimes being a bit more honest about that shared objective will help matters, right? So NHS England are trying to, let's say their long-term plan is to try and reduce 150,000 extra cardiovascular events, right, by the end of 2029. Yeah. That's their NHS England objective, long-term plan. Now, any company that comes to the market and can kind of, how can we help the NHS England achieve that objective, right? That's a shared goal. We're trying to do the same thing. Yeah. We're trying to reduce cardiovascular events. We're not trying to get the NHS to do something they didn't want to do. And so sometimes I think that element of recognition that we're trying to achieve the same objective, I think is a massive part of this. But it has to be about building trust and about myth busting some of the sort of perceptions of what the industry is and what it isn't. But honestly, I don't know how many people work in the pharmaceutical industry in the UK, but I'd say hundreds of thousands in the UK alone, right? In different roles. They are doing this because they want to bring science and medicine to those that need it most, right? That is at the heart of it. And so, which is exactly the same as often why healthcare professionals are doing what they do. And so I think that's a big part of it. Like I said, build that trust, having open conversations, having open dialogue about how we can best collaborate and achieve the same shared objective. And so there are great examples of it, but there needs to be more. I think that's where we need to get to, and to achieve outcomes, the best possible outcomes. It will be through collaboration, no doubt about it.
Samuel, so I share that vision of where I believe in the future for the advancement of human health, that it involves a collaboration, not just between healthcare provider, healthcare service, but also the entrepreneurs, the startups, the scale-ups, the co-ops, the industry. Everyone sitting at one table, right? Now, I know you said we've come a long way, but on the ground, when you are on the ground, are there certain barriers that are still there? I know you've said be more transparent, trust, but what more can we do to sort of build that trust? How can we build it further? What can clinicians do on the ground? What can our listeners do? What can people like me and Abdul do who are also entrepreneurs? What can we do?
I guess it's about talking and understanding why people are wanting to do things, right? And I think that if you understand the objectives that we're trying to, that let's say a health tech's trying to do, or that a pharmaceutical company is trying to do, is trying to reach more patients to help the NHS deliver on their objectives, right, to keep patients out of hospital,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I think that sometimes it's that, in actually speaking and communicating to each other and learning what we're all trying to do. And can we, if we haven't already got a shared objective, can we create one, right?
Yes.
Can we have something we're all working towards? And at the moment, there's the NHS long-term plan, and we can and there are many other objectives, of course. I'm just picking that one. But that's, and we could find ways, but we could create our own objectives, right, that we're trying to do. So I would encourage, it's about communicating with each other, better understanding what we're trying to set out to do, rather than keeping assumptions and perceptions of what industries are trying to do or health techs are trying to do. Health techs are trying to do a quick buck and then sell. Pharmaceutical companies are trying to shift as many pills as possible. That's not true, right? Most people are doing this for the genuinely because they want to work in healthcare and they want to benefit patients. And so I think largely it's open communication about our objectives, and that then builds trust, which then will create genuine purpose-led collaborations, right? Not collaborations for the sake of it, not vanity project things you can put on your website to say we work together. Things that are purpose-led because that we've got a shared objective. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that.
The COVID pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and especially with the vaccines and the rollout of the vaccines, the speed, the research, the collaboration, it was really a shining point within the pandemic, I thought. And I really think that it highlights what can be possible in the future if we all come together, because that was a time when we did come together. So yeah.
I mean, it was right. I mean, it was probably one of our it's through huge adversity, but should be one of our proudest moments of as a healthcare collective system, right? Whether with tech, pharma, healthcare professionals coming together to achieve something that was we didn't see coming, and we ultimately helped us all out of it much quicker than it would have been. I've no doubt about it. So I think it should be something that we how do we find that what lit the fire for that to help us achieve the same things in the future.
Definitely. We talked a lot about your career, your journey, kind of rising through the ranks. The one thing we didn't talk about, and I think it's important we share, is failure, setback. Do you mind sharing moments where things didn't go as planned, things you struggled with? It might be team, and how you overcome that?
Yeah, look, I think there are lots of things that maybe don't work like you set out to work on, and I guess this is why, again, going back to the Be More Lobster, having a growth mindset, largely it's about repositioning. What have you learned from that you're not going to do the same again, right? And so we unlike those that work on the front line, I guess when when you've got a patient in front of you, it's a bit harder to say, oh, I won't do that again, I'll try it differently next time, right? We're very blessed, actually, that it's generally not life or death, right, what we're doing in terms of bringing medicines to market. The benefits they have, of course, will be life or death.
Of course.
But in terms of the how we do it, I guess we are often, we have research and development, where we're trying things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But also from how we bring the medicines to the market, to the healthcare professionals, we try different things. And it's almost like commercial R&D, right? So there's the R&D on one side, which is, finding out which medicines would work. But sometimes we try things, and if they don't work, we learn from it. So I think that as long as there is a strong will to want to try things and fail, but fail fast and learn from it, honestly, then I think we're fine. And I've had plenty of examples of initiatives which have cost a lot of money, and we've tried it and it hasn't worked. But honestly, it's not lost investment, because what we've learned from that is if we did it differently, it would have worked. So on all of these things, as long as you invest time in reflecting on why it didn't work, and you truly understand the why it didn't work, and you've got good insights and good learnings, then it hasn't been a waste, because you will then make sure that you don't do the same thing again. You can help, in our case, you can help other countries achieve it differently, or different launches you would approach in a different way because you've had this learning most recently. So, yeah, a lot of it just comes down to just, rather than just to walk away and go, well, that didn't work, and then you do the same thing again, right? It's as long as you are crystallizing the insights and the learnings, then others will benefit. And I think that That's it. And I think that the concept of failing is, I mean, I hate the word because immediately everyone thinks negatively, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
But often it's the fear isn't the fear of failure. I'm going to sound like I'm going to sound like one of those calendars that has a quote every day, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the fear of failure. Often it's the fear of people fear what they think the consequences are of failure, right?
Yeah.
So, and often that's just a mindset that you think, right, if I fail, I'm losing my job. Or if I fail, I'm going to be thought of differently and maybe won't get that next career job, but actually, if you work in an organization that encourages entrepreneurship, encourages people to take appropriate risks, encourages people to try things, then actually, I think you're going to get a stronger organization. You're going to get things that don't work every time, but you're going to get an organization that's learned from it and ensures it doesn't happen next time. So I just think that that's it, because if the consequence of the fear actually isn't real, and you can help people see that by role modeling that there shouldn't be fear because there's not a consequence, then I think you'll get people trying more things, being more entrepreneurial, and that's what we all need, right?
No, I love that, and I think that is a nice way to kind of end the podcast, in the sense that I could sense some of the vulnerability even in discussion today, just openly sharing your experience, why you did certain things. And no doubt I can see why you have kind of risen the ranks and become a leader, and kind of you're empowering. I love the lobster thing. I might make it the snippet for the actual podcast.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm moving. I'm moving. So
tell us a bit more about this role.
Well, I was going to say, I'm in two minds whether I take the lobster with me, Abdul and Ams. I've got to think about it, whether it will land in the audience. But I've in my career, I've had 19 years, as you quite nicely pointed out, Abdul.
Apologies.
But, it's okay. A few years of that was in the US, a few years in the US, a few years in Switzerland. Most of the time has been the UK, but I've got a great opportunity to move into a country president role in Central Europe. So again,
amazing.
Challenging myself, different culture, working in a different country with a new healthcare system that I haven't worked with before. But again, the same things will apply. Like, how can I, as a leader, help the associates employees achieve things they didn't think were possible? How can we grow and learn through things that maybe didn't work so well? So it's really exciting sort of journey. Sad to leave the UK for a little while, but I'm sure I'll be back. But it's a great opportunity. Yeah.
No, very well deserved, and I have no doubt as to why you've been offered such an opportunity. Clearly, you do have a genuine passion for what you do, and that is always a reflection in the way we work, the way we carry ourselves, and actually does feed into our team. It's been a massive pleasure, Samuel, to have you on the show, to share your journey. We very rarely have people from the world of pharma on here, so it's nice to kind of look inside your world for once.
Yeah. Look, guys. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for stalking me on LinkedIn, Abdul, as you say. But I think that one extra bit of, like, if for those that work in health tech or in the NHS or any healthcare system, like, if you want to understand more roles that exist in the pharmaceutical industry, we have an industry body called the ABPI, and on the ABPI website, there's some great case studies of the different kinds of jobs that exist in the pharmaceutical industry, which honestly, I wish that existed when I joined this industry 19 years ago, because it was either sales or research, and that's all I thought existed. Yeah. The reality is there's loads of amazing roles that actually are available to anyone, right? But especially if you've come with a clinical background, you're open to many of those. Medical affairs we've talked about already, but you'll see many other things like regulatory and others. And I think, I had a look before I came on here, and there's some really good resources on the ABPI website if anyone's interested.
Amazing.
No, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. We'll link it in the show notes, in the description. But no, thank you once again, Samuel, for coming on to the show today.